Hello, everyone, and good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome to another author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia. Many of you know me as the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill. And joining us back again on the show is a returning Wandering Scribe alumni. Now, for those who remember this incredible guest, he was born in Dominica. His grandparents raised him in the village of, I'm probably going to butcher this. Giraudel. Again, I
You got
probably
it. You got it. Very good. Giraudel.
before moving to the U.S. at the age of 11, and he always wanted to be a writer, but went into real estate management and has done every job in real estate you could think of, from doorman, porter, and leasing manager to renting apartments in Manhattan and selling $1 million homes in Brooklyn. He loves everything fantasy from Tolkien to George R. R. Martin and every RPG game under the sun. And as he rekindled his love for writing, his particular interest in swords and sorcery became the basis for his debut series, I Am King. Now, he lives in New York City with his wife, his son, and his daughter. And as many of you remember from our first interview, we talked about the first in the I Am King series. Well, joining us back again on the show, we're going to be talking about the sequel to I Am King Book 2. So without further ado, let's give a huge round of applause to returning guest, Mr. Damien Shillingford. Damien, welcome back.
Hey, Gabe. Thanks for having me again. I really appreciate you thinking about me, giving me an opportunity to be on your platform, to introduce myself to your audience and new audiences. It means a lot. Thank you.
No problem, Damien. No problem. I'm so excited to have you back on the show and glad to stay up to date with all of your stuff, with everything. And as a little fun icebreaker question to this follow-up interview, you have done a lot in your career, both professionally and as a writer. I'm very curious. Is there anything about your personality or facet of your being that a lot of people may not know about you?
Man, that's good. I guess for folks who don't know me, I rap, so I got some skills there. Funny enough, I'll be going to Florida in 2 weeks. I made it into this competition called the 16 Bar Challenge.
Ooh.
Be at the Flavor Fest 2025 gathering. It's a church gathering. It's the hip hop music is Christian influence, so it's Christian hip hop.
Ooh, okay.
So, no negative subject matter, all positivity about Christ and living your life as a Christian. But yeah, so I do make music, and it's not something I widely share. I created it more for myself because it's something I've done since a kid. And recently I got back into recording because I found out how affordable it is. So I was like, you know what, let me try writing some music again. And I got back into it and I started rapping, and now I'm going to be in this competition. And yeah, and it's another one of my facets of the arts. So it's martial arts, it's literature, writing, and music creation. So I just like different ways to express myself.
Nice. That's awesome. That is really, really cool.
Thank
Before
you.
this interview is over, I will have to tell you about another guest to possibly look into, to possibly collaborate, because I definitely think you guys would be very, very good. But,
Okay. Yes. Excited for that. Yes.
nice. So, as mentioned in the introduction, you are the author behind the incredible series I Am King. Now, for our viewers who are just now meeting you for the very first time, what can you tell us as an overview of the series from book 1 to now book 2?
Right. Yes. So I Am King is it's a hidden prince trope, sword and sorcery. It's about two young boys. Our main protagonist is a young boy named Beau, who's named after my own son, Beau, but the character's full name is Beaumont. And he's a hidden prince, and his country was destroyed, his father and mother assassinated, and he's hiding away until he comes of age to reclaim the throne that his father lost. When we start in book one, Beau is 10 years old, along with his companion, his cousin Julius. And the book quickly, it is a fantasy-based book, and the mythology is based on my own upbringing and culture, which is West Indian culture. So it's a mix of the traditional European fantasy and then mashing that with West Indian mythology and culture. So the characters, most of the lead characters are folks of color. We do have other, people represented. But overall, the book quickly turns into a book about survival as they trying to fight through their environment, and they fight monsters, and there's magic, and there are paladins and warlocks. And the boys find themselves in a situation where they have to kind of depend on the sellsword or adults around them to help them. Now, when book two now picks up at the end of book one, I have to try my best not to do any spoilers.
Of course.
But with our protagonists continuing their journey, and they're not in the Middle Islands yet. So this is if I could put it in terms that would make most sense, this is kind of like a tropical area island where Beau's ancestry is and where he's from. But we still remain in this Northern European atmosphere. So the book continues there. And now the world that they're in, it expands a little bit more. So the book gets a bit more political. You kind of get a better idea of the political scene that's happening. There's a civil war going on. And then I introduce a whole new race of characters called the Rafkin, which I kind of mimic from Norse mythology. So we have a new character, a new powerful, strong lead character, a woman by the name of Skadia Giant's Blood. I love her so much. I'm so happy I had the opportunity to really like delve in and create that character. She's a lot of fun, really tough, a real pain in the butt for our heroes. But and that's where the book continues from there. Yeah.
Nice. So going back from our previous interview to now, what really has changed for you, Damien, since the last time you were on the show? Because again, I've been keeping up to date with everything you've been doing. You have been busy. So how have things changed for you as an author, like since a year ago, since you were last on the show?
Yeah. So I would say what I learned I learned a lot of lessons from doing the first book. And you know this as author yourself, like you go through that process. That first book took me years to write, whereas with the second book, I would say about a year and a half to get it down, finished, and published and everything. So slightly picked up the pace. But I learned a lot of lessons about the process, how to deal with making mistakes and how to forgive myself for that and be a little easier on myself. This helped me deal with a lot of anxiety because, when you publish and you put yourself out there, you're very exposed. And this is a very personal story. So I definitely remember with the first book having so much anxiety when I hit that publish button and just had like weeks and weeks of not sleeping because of this. Whereas with this, when it came to the second part of this, with this new process, it was easier because I'd been there. I went through it. I didn't die. I survived. I made it. My book actually got a ton of good positive reviews. And, while I was telling myself a lot of other negative things, because as the creator, you see all the flaws. And even in the smallest things, and then your readers, they don't even pick up on it. And you're like, how did they not see this? Or how did they, it seems like they're okay with this. And I guess it comes down to being able to accept your flowers and be graceful to yourself. And, just understand that I put a lot of effort into it and it's good. People enjoy it. And that's the reason why I wrote it. I loved it. And my hope was there would be other like-minded people who would connect with the material. So I definitely learned that part to really just be not so tough on myself with the right publishing process and just kind of let it flow.
Absolutely, Damien. So now let's talk about the creation of book two, and I'll try to make sure these questions are not too spoiler influence, so that way we can add the mystery
to that too. Yeah, for sure.
All right. So let's start with the beginning stage, the creation, the idea process. So from book one to book two, what were sort of the ideas that went into developing what book two would be like? And as a add-on fan question, to this. What were some of the challenges of writing a sequel to this book?
Good. So I'll answer the first part first. So okay, so my entire series, I plan to do 5 to 6 books for the series. It's pretty much all plotted and laid out. So I have a general idea of how the story is going to develop all the way to the final conclusion. But the interesting thing that happens once you get into the flow of it, and as far as my structure or my approach, it's very structured. I kind of have every single chapter, whose POV I'm working from, who's in the scene, and what's the point of the scene and how it goes and ends. And then I fill it in with, the flow of when I'm writing it at the time. But these things, inspiration hits you at any moment, and a conversation could be going a certain way, and then I have to kind of like pivot and change it in a good way, because then it becomes more fluid and alive when I'm creating it. So even though I have this very set structure, it changes very much. It's a very fluid document that I use. I'll delete scenes and add new things, create new characters, remove certain things that I thought would work. And now I'm like, with the way the book is pacing, this is not going to work anymore. So now I have to change that. So there's a lot of back and forth, through that process. What was the second half of that question? The fan?
Yes, the second half of that question was, since this is a sequel,
Oh,
what were
yeah.
some of the challenges that you discovered along the way when writing a sequel? Because that's always as we'll talk later on, a very daunting task to write a follow-up to a great first book.
Yeah. First of all, the first thing that struck me was there were some things that came out of the first book that I wasn't prepared for. One of the things was the love that a lot of people had for a particular character. And I had a set transition for that character because I loved him too, but I didn't realize it was going to be as strong as it was. So I had to make a decision on how to incorporate this character enough to keep him connected to the audience, make sure that they still enjoy him. And then another challenge I faced, and again, from the success of book 1, was my antagonist was so compelling. And I feel that the antagonist I created, that character, was such an anchor for that first book. Now it's like, how do I replicate that? Because I definitely don't want to do a cookie cutter because it was successful and do the same kind of thing. I had to reinvent that a little bit. So that was a challenge. That I think when I was starting the process, I kind of had to just start writing the book because I got stuck right there. Like, what is going to be the motivation for this bad guy? I don't want to create a cardboard cutout of a villain, twirling the mustache. I'm just evil to be evil. That doesn't sell, does it? People don't buy that. It doesn't make sense. Right. And it breaks you out of the immersion so easily when you're reading about someone who's just like, what is his motivation? And I never thought I would be in a position where I'm sitting there spending hours taking notes and watching movies and going back to my favorite books and trying to develop an idea of what's going to make this villain compelling. So that was difficult. And the other technical difficult part was, as well as I know my stories, I kept forgetting a lot of smaller details, which I always thought in me that I knew. So I would have to go back to my old manuscript and do, searches to find certain things and to make sure I kept the fluid plot lines connected. And that's very difficult, especially with so many moving parts. And book 2 is pretty thick compared to book 1. I wish I had a copy to show you, but a lot of story went in there. So it was, I would say, from transitioning to the sequel, developing a good motivation for my villain, and then keeping the plots and the story connected seamlessly without any like big glaring mistakes. Yeah, absolutely.
I know the exact feeling, and you and I are very much the same in that regard, like terms of the size of the sequel. An example, my next book that's coming out, hopefully next few months, or next year, is Decimus, the Wolf of Rome. Now, the last time I had you on the show, I think I had already published my third book or second book at the time. I have to check into, but this was the book that I was promoting at the time. and that was Amnetus, Son of Persia. It's a very, very thin book because this was the first journey into speculative fiction. The sequel, Decimus the Wolf of Rome, is 64 chapters, almost 500 pages, and almost just like you, Damien, I had to think of, okay, how do I make sure that they, don't overlap too much where it's going to be confusing, but it's a nice, seamless transition. And correct me if I'm wrong, Damien, but in your books, there's also time skips, correct? That from book 1 to book 2, there are going to be time skips. So that's also a thing to consider, that it makes sense that, we were just seeing this character at this point in their life. Now here's the transition, correct?
Yeah, so luckily from book 1 to book 2, it kind of picks up the action right away. Think of Fellowship of the Ring into the Two Towers. So there wasn't that much time change at all. You just kind of continue the story.
Right.
But so once book 2 was settled and done, with the promotion, marketing and stuff, I started getting into what my next project in the series would be in that world. And I decided to start working on my next novella, which those are a little easier to write because it kind of does some backstory and it picks certain characters to expand on. Pretty small. But after that, now I had to get into writing book 3. And book 3 is where the first huge leap happens in the series. So book 1 and book 2, our protagonists, Beaumont and Julius, these boys are 10 years old. Now, once we start book 3, we're going to jump about 5 years and they're going to be 15. And now they're going to be in a completely different environment. And that's where the big jump comes. So that's a challenge. I already have it all structured, but I have not gotten into the writing of it. So that's something I'm still working out. I have a general idea of how I'm going to open the story, but they're going to be older. Their voices have to be familiar, but changed,
Right.
Yeah. They can't have that same boyish attitude that they had when I first did the first 2 books, because now there's 5 years in between that, and they're grown up. And in the Middle Ages, or in this time frame, and you could best, correct me on this, but I believe young boys were considered young men at a much younger age, like 14, 15. You're a man. You're going to go fight. You're going to work in the field. You have responsibilities, so their worlds have to really significantly change. So that's a big challenge. So I'm praying that I nail it.
Nice. And now going on the topic of characters, going back to what you were saying about the villains, which I think is very important, because a hero is a hero, but everyone loves a good villain because that is what truly sells the story. You want this character to be the true foil, the true opposite of the hero. And I'm very curious, Damien, if you can go more in detail for all of your characters, how you make them complex, but also authentic. And more importantly, that it makes sense for these type of characters to exist in this world. And the reason why I specified this, as from one author to another, as well as from one reader to another, we have seen characters in different media that don't really make sense, that they don't feel like they're supposed to be there unless it's explicitly stated as a plot element. It's going to throw the story completely out of whack. So for us as authors, we want to make characters that not only feel authentic and real, but it makes sense for them to exist in the world that we have written them into.
Yeah. So, and I really love this question and this particular subject as well, because it's so very important. So when I started taking my writing seriously and I knew I wanted to be published, before I engaged in writing, I started doing some research. And what I would do is I would go to Amazon and I would look for popular, really super popular books and maybe mid-tier and some low quality stuff. And then I would go to the 1-star reviews. And I would read and kind of get a lot of it from those 1-star reviews. And as you read these things and you go through them, and I've read hundreds, just really doing research before I started writing, then you find some themes. And that's why I use that particular term, that cardboard cutout. I had I read so many reviews of readers complaining about characters who have no life. They're just kind of in the scene and they have no personality. They're just words on the page. And as a reader myself, I've encountered that. So I connected and I recognized that. So I knew right off the bat, okay, flat characters obviously don't work. And then the other complaint that I found a lot were characters who kind of made decisions that obviously don't make sense, but it was used as a plot. Like, I'm going to make this character not so smart in their decision making, even though they're supposed to be this amazing hero, just to move the plot along. So a lot of that kind of fell back on like lazy writing, not really effort into really building out something that's compelling, a reasoning that's compelling. So having that information, that's how I approach building my own characters. I said to myself, okay, this is what I enjoy reading and this is what I want to create. So how do I do this? So one of the biggest compliments I received in my writing was how authentic my younger protagonist felt. Like Julius, you know, people, if you read any of my reviews, you would see this sprinkled a lot where they say, you know, this author wrote these characters and they're very realistic. They react in this world like I think a 10-year-old in this position would react. You know, like I captured that. And to create that as it helped that the fact that I'm a father and I have children. So I have that real world experience of what children are like. They're fun and exciting, but the things you don't usually hear about is how whiny they are, how hungry they get all the time. The emotions of the crying and having to, so I was able to capture that essence and rebuild it for these characters, and everything I did with them, I made sure to always think back, how would a 10-year-old in this situation without their comfortable adult family deal with these other adults that are kind of like taking care of them, you know? And then from there, I attach I was very intentional of attaching certain personality traits. So I'll attach certain personality traits to each character. Someone might be a little bit more aggressive. Someone might be a little bit more passive. Like between Beau and Julius, it's a nice reflection of one another, because Beau's a bit softer and easygoing, whereas Julius, the kid, is a bit more athletic and aggressive and in your face. So it's a nice play on them, and it gives, and I realized the other thing that happens when you take time to really build out the characters that way is on the page, when you're reading from each character, they each have a different voice, because they're going to answer questions a particular way in their way of answering questions, or they're going to react to a certain scenario in their particular way. So you could recognize and hear each character's voice on the page. So yeah, I mean, character building is a huge thing. And on the point of the villain, I agree with you 100%. And I've always said this. When you look back, let's say if we look at some of our favorite actors, let's use Daniel Day-Lewis as an amazing actor, amazing roles throughout his career. You know, Last of the Mohicans, you know, My Left Foot, but he stands out in Gangs of New York. His Bill Butcher, I mean, that's right up there with Heath's Joker. I mean, that character is so compelling. He and I love Leonardo in that movie. It's great. Everyone's great, but that movie is anchored by Daniel Day-Lewis in this character as this villain. And as much as you're supposed to hate him because he's the bad guy, I always want to see him in every scene because I just love being in his presence because he's so charismatic and interesting and crazy. And the same thing with the Joker in Batman, you know, like that Joker it's legend now, you know, like that his whole career, even with everything he did, God rest his soul, rest in peace. Joker will be his crowning achievement, that villain. Another good example is Denzel Washington with his huge body of work. Everyone talks about Training Day.
Yes.
Alonzo, right? That character, that bad guy. I can't even think of another villain that he ever played, that Denzel ever played. I don't think
I think there is one more. American Gangster. I believe that's the name of the movie.
True. Yes. American Gangster. But even there, I still think Training Day trumps that.
Yes, that is true.
And then he dies in the end, which is amazing. So I took that thought process going into creating my own book. And I think that's why in my first book, my character, the antagonist Royce, ends up being a lot of readers' favorite. Like, you know, people are you team Gavin or are you team Royce? And everyone loves Royce. He's just that charismatic bad guy. And when I built him out, I knew that I needed a compelling villain to really drive the story. And I thank God I nailed it, you know. But again, that took a lot of research and being very, very intentional of not doing any lazy writing and making sure that in this world, like you said, these characters are going to make decisions that make sense to readers, because readers, they pick up on it. As readers ourselves, you pick up on it right away. Like, especially as a writer, you're like, this was lazy. Like, this author is kind of doing, like, taking a shortcut here. Like, you could have worked this out a little better, you know?
Absolutely. And still kind of on the train of literature and film, just like as film, we have that one favorite scene that we enjoy. And even film historians and film scholars will pull a scene from a movie and dissect it to really see what was the director trying to convey? What was the director trying to get across? Same thing with authors. We have so many great scenes that we love to write, and some scenes that are very challenging to write. So for you, Damien, and you can either reference book one or go a little bit into book two, but what has been both your favorite scene to write and your most challenging scene to write?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as you said that, a couple of things pop in my head. Because interestingly enough, when I'm thinking about my books and writing them, in my mind, I always picture very specific scenes. Just like you said, these scenes that are going to make the story. You know, the way I see it in my head, it's almost like, you know, when you watch like a movie trailer and you see all big highlight scenes. That's exactly the way I look at it. Now, as far as my favorite scenes to write, I remember when I was really daydreaming and kind of like creating book one. One of the biggest scenes that came to mind that I was always like preparing myself mentally to write, like I want to get to this kind of helped me continue through the book, because I kept wanting to get to this part and write this scene. I'm looking forward to writing this. It had to do with an action sequence in a place called the High Bridge, where our heroes are running away from a mob of ghouls, and there's this large bridge, but it's broken. And one of our protagonists, Gavin, he's carrying the two boys, and he has this ember blade, which is empowering him beyond his normal strength. Kind of think of like Thor with the hammer. And he has to make this jump through this gap, which is, you know, without any extra kind of powers or whatever, it's not possible. You're just going into the abyss. But since he has the sword, he has that extra energy. He's running, but then he has the boys in his hands. He doesn't quite make it. He realizes they're not going to make it. So he uses whatever strength he has to kind of like throw them forward and hope that they catch onto the edge, which they do. And then he plummets to his demise. I visualized that scene so many times, and it's such an epic scene because it's kind of like the culmination of a lot of action. It's in the third act, so there's a lot of action that builds up to this big finish, and then emotionally the way it's supposed to hit. And then the other scenes that kind of stick out to me that I always want to write, besides the action scenes, would be the very high emotional scenes. So for book two, that had to be a particular scene where I have to be mindful of spoilers. Certain characters are kind of falling away from one another, and it's a very, very emotional moment that I had to try to capture. So what I do is when I go into these scenes, like something that's very emotional like that, I try to put myself there for like as much as I can physically, like mentally. I'll think of something sad or a moment in my life where I was hurt. So while I'm writing and creating the scene and writing the dialogue, I'm in this very emotional state, almost like to the brink of tears. And I remember I had a scene like that as well in book one. And I remember when I wrote it, I'm feeling the tears welling up, like really literally like when I'm there at the laptop. And then once I finally write it and it's done, I kind of had that release and I cry. you know, because I built that energy up to that point. And then I always remember when I reread that section, I get that feeling again, like it pulls me in. So it kind of like, it's a trigger to me to know that, okay, my voice at the time of creating this, that energy I put into this scene, it should work. And the idea is that when someone else reads it, they're gonna feel, because you know, when you read something, you get that author's voice.
Yes.
I truly believe that there are a lot of things that we see and we can't see, but there is energy. And I feel like once we create this art, music, literature, a sculpture, a painting, wherever our energy and our attention are at the time, we could put that into the page, and when someone else opens it, they could get that same energy back. I truly believe that. So when I write these emotional scenes, I always try to make sure I'm in that mind state when I do it. As far as difficult scenes, the fight scenes, action scenes are always, they're always tough. I had to kind of make a decision of how I wanted to create those, because as someone who reads fantasy, you know, there are authors who like to do the full details, like he throws a left, he ducks to the right, the overhand, like very detailed fight scenes. And then if you look at some of the older style fantasy, like if you look at battle scenes in Tolkien, Tolkien skillfully kind of gives the reader more of a leeway to kind of imagine the scene. He'll put a few movements or actions there if it's very important to the plot or the way the fight plays out. But for the most part, it's kind of like, you know, the warriors clash into a group of enemies, and the battle, and he kind of describes the scene as a whole, the feeling, the atmosphere, and then the fight's over. So I kind of like play with those two things, and I kind of lean towards that older technique, because I think at this day and age, with the way people consume media and stuff like that, I don't feel we, like, as authors, and this is just my opinion, I don't think we have to go into the full details of the story to describe a fight. I think for the most part, most readers are going to have a general sense if you create that environment for them, and then they could kind of like fill in the gap. So when it comes to those scenes, they're still very difficult, technical level, but it kind of helped me to kind of create the atmosphere instead of going into the full details, and then leave the rest up to the reader.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just also to add to that, there's also something that my editor also brought up, is that, to what you're saying, that we want to be, especially for the modern day fantasy authors, we want to be as very specific and detailed as possible. And that can be good, but we tend to lose the feeling and the emotion of the scene. What are the characters thinking? How are they reacting to, let's say, getting their stomach cut open? What are they going to be like? I mean, they can't just keep fighting nonstop. I mean, it's not like a cartoon where you can't have that leeway. No, you have to make it as grounded, depending on the story, and realistic as possible. Even if it is like heightened fantasy with magic and monsters, a normal person, unless you specify that they are a godlike character, a normal person is not going to keep fighting if they're severely cut and bruised. You have to talk about, you know, what are they feeling? What is their emotions? Because that also slows down the fight just enough so it's not happening so fast and the fight's over.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
It is very, very true. And kind of leading into that, I did want to talk about, and you actually mentioned this earlier, and that is, of course, the trailer that you have made for book 2. And that actually segues into the discussion of what does it mean to be an author in the digital age, because the industry has changed over the last 20 years or so, even more so with the quarantine and lockdown. And it's, as I've seen it, and probably you've seen it too, Damien, social media is a double-edged sword for authors. It's a great tool to build a platform, build a fan base, but we also leave ourselves exposed to the negative side of social media, which can heighten our imposter syndrome, make us doubt ourselves.
Oh my God.
And yeah, and a majority of authors, we are not marketers. We are authors first and foremost, and we have to constantly experiment with new tools to use. In the case of either making trailers, promoting concept art, anything, it's a lot. So ultimately, Damien, I would like to hear your thoughts on how you have perceived yourself in this digital age. And for you, what does it mean to be an author in this digital age with tropes, themes, AI covers,
Mhm.
everything like that? I would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know what your comfort level is with this. I mean, you do the podcast, the Wandering Scribe, and you're on the camera all the time, and you do it so natural and you're so calm. For me, even doing something like the first interview we did, and even
Mhm.
this one, it still builds a certain level of anxiety. But unfortunately, from all my research and what I understand, and seeing other authors who are doing very well creating and expanding their fan base and getting the word out there on their stories, and really just reaching more people, you kind of with social media, like book talk, and with Instagram, they have the bookgram and stuff like that, these different hashtags. As an author, you have to be out there. For the most part, you're kind of selling yourself. I don't want that to sound in a negative way, but you're introducing yourself to your readers. I'm a real person. I'm actually writing these stories. This is what I like, and I like fantasy too, and and blah blah blah. And you connect with them, and you do videos, and you have to kind of be out there. And I'll be honest, it's just something that doesn't come naturally to me. I'm not.
Mhm.
I didn't come up in, I would say, to be honest, really in the social media age. And even when it came out, I wasn't really that much into it. I was more, about living in my space and being in the world, whereas going on social media and engaging with strangers, it just wasn't very natural. And then on top of that, like you said, you deal with the imposter syndrome. I mean, even in my life right now, I don't really tell people I'm an author. I mean, I should, because I am an author and I should claim that. But when I say that to myself, just on a personal level, it just feels uncomfortable. I'm
Mm.
not sure why. I'm sure it has something to do with self-esteem or my self-image or something like that. And I think it ties back to that imposter syndrome. So, I mean, that's something that I'm personally, working on. I wouldn't call it a struggle, but it's something I'm developing. I'm trying to develop that muscle. I agree with you. We're authors, and I always tell people this. It's an interesting thing when the conversation does come up, and you let someone know that you're a writer, you're an author, and they might nitpick you then on grammar and things like that. So what I've come to understand, and it took me a while to learn this too, as an author, I'm not an editor. That's a whole different skill set.
Mhm.
An editor doesn't have the imagination that someone like yourself and I have to create a story and do a plot and create a whole world. They could edit books and they know the structure and the rules, whereas I know them somewhat loosely, but I could create a great story out of nothing. So it's a different skill set. And on that point, just like marketing and promotion, that's a completely different skill set. My idea and taste of what's a good sellable book cover might be completely wrong to what a professional who knows how to market and capture people's eyes, and they kind of know what a fantasy reader is looking for when they're scrolling through all those hundreds of thousands of options, what they're going to click on. I don't have that skill set. So what I try to do is I lean on other people who have that skill. Like, for example, my wife is very instrumental in my marketing. This is something she's very good at. She has a good eye for it. She spends more time in that kind of realm of social media because she's also an entrepreneur. So she runs her own consulting business. So she has to market herself and her business. So she has more experience doing that. And she's comfortable at doing it. So, I learned a lot of things from her, and I kind of lean on her for that. But on a personal level, I do need to put myself out there more. I need to be my face. I need to do videos. I need to be more in my social media because that's going to really help. With the AI, I love AI. I think it's a great addition, especially for writers and authors, for like structuring and keeping yourself organized and doing research, which is huge. Like, it's so good to be able to get some
Mhm.
quick answers and historical points and options. Because again, when you're writing fantasy, we're always in that kind of medieval, atmosphere or tier or timeline. So it's important to kind of get a lot of like you said, the details right, so the story doesn't sound crazy. Even the terminology. Do you hit your horse or do you just kind of like nod it to a tree? Like, how do you say these things? How does an adventurer in this time take care of a horse? You might think to yourself, how is that important? But it might be a small part of my book. But if I get that wrong, it's going to be a huge thing for readers, you know, even if it's
Mhm.
just a little scene. So all these little things you had to get right. And yeah, so AI kind of helps kind of bridge that gap in the knowledge. And then with the trailer. So this was something I thought about when I first developed my writing that I wanted to do. But at the time, the AI technology wasn't very sophisticated, so it wasn't good at all. But this year, I kind of jumped into it again with the Google Flow, using the VO3, and the results were absolutely mind blowing. Like I felt like Peter Jackson, man. Like I'm creating these scenes and these prompts, and it's just coming out so amazing. And I have thousands upon thousands of clips that I created out of this thing. Now it's just about editing and putting them together, putting whatever works together to kind of like build out this trailer. But just the fact that it's possible is super exciting. And I feel like more authors, maybe they're doing this already. I haven't even looked into it because I haven't really gotten into creating my own trailer, but I feel like if you're an author and you're not doing this, I think you might be missing out, because some people are more visual. If you're going to capture them in marketing, and if they see a pretty cool like 1.5 minute trailer on YouTube of this fantasy story or movie, and they're like, "What is this?" And it's like a book, and like, "Oh, I want to read this book." If all these things are in there, and visually, it's so striking and realistic. It's just a lot of fun. It's something new, and I don't have to be in front of the camera, which helps.
Mhm.
So yeah, I've been playing around with it, and it just opens up a new frontier. AI is a tool. I know some people don't like it, but it's just a tool like anything else. You use it, the best you can, and to help you, kind of do what it is you want to actually do. And yeah, I'm all for it, but I'm definitely excited to finalize this trailer and see how it comes out. Super excited.
That's awesome. That's really incredible to hear, Damien. And you know what? You're absolutely correct about, a lot of authors, this nervousness, this hesitancy to claim the title that we are authors. And I'll also be the first to say this as well. Like when I started the Wandering Scribe, I was just audio. No one saw my face. I was just me. And the only reason I got an Instagram was because a lot of my friends and new colleagues that I have met at a convention were all on Instagram. I'm not a very social media type person. The only
I get
social
it. Yeah.
media I have is Instagram, which I've had for about now 3 years. I've
Mm,
had Blue Sky more recently, LinkedIn. I don't do Facebook. I don't do Twitter. I don't do any of the big ones.
I don't
And
Twitter yet, or X. Yeah.
yeah, and I've also realized that tech savvy is not my thing. I mean, yes, I can do a few things, but I am very, very minimalist in terms of it.
Yeah.
I try to do what I can.
Hmm.
That's why when it comes to like making book trailers or stuff, I always get people who specialize that. I'll provide them the scripts and everything.
Yeah.
But I've also realized that as an author with social media, I have learned new things about how to market my book, how to make those connections. Shout out to my friend Kaylee Robinson for this. She actually gave great advice for any author. Is that for social media, we want to, or we should, as authors, follow the ones that we have the most engagement with. I know everyone says, "Oh, we have these many followers." Yeah, but how many of those are you actually on a good basis with? How many of those do you actually consistently talk with? And she
Mm,
even said that she unfollowed like so many. And when she realized the actual number of people who she actually follows, her engagement was a lot more positive.
mm,
And that's an incredible thing that I've learned from her about marketing that I didn't before. And this is another question, Damien, for
yeah.
you. What is the one thing you wish you knew about marketing your book that you didn't know before?
That's a great question. The first thing that comes to my mind instantly is having a solid book launch. I didn't realize how important that was to kind of really get that momentum going, to be on not really paying for ads on social media, but to be active on social media, engaging with folks, to let them know if you're looking for a brand new read this summer, then you should definitely check out. If you're into this is coming out in a week. Like, you know, I wish I had a better grasp. Like, I knew about it, but I didn't take it seriously enough, since marketing and being on social media is not a subject that
Right.
you know, attracts me or gets me excited. So I knew I needed it, but I didn't look into it. And I wish I would have paid more attention to that, because I feel now, with what I know now, having a good launch is literally almost everything, because you want to ride that momentum as much as possible. And coincidentally, in the background, the algorithm supports that. So if you have a good launch with good sales in the first week, first few days, then the algorithm is going to take over after that, and it's literally just going to promote your book for free for you, because it sees that it's selling. And I didn't know this. It wasn't until I hit a slump in sales and not much was happening that I was like, okay, now that there's not much going on, let me look into this now, which was, I don't want to say it was silly, because I learned. So I know that going forward, I'm going to pay more attention to this. But I definitely wish I paid more attention to it. Like, if I was to give advice to like a new author, right, I would definitely tell them to button that up. If you can do it yourself, then go to Fiverr and, you know, hire someone who kind of has that ability or that experience, because that book launch is huge. You want to burst onto that scene. You want to take off like Usain Bolt. You know, you want to really have a lot of momentum behind you when your book comes out to really find your audience and, you know, really gain some good success.
Absolutely, Damien. Absolutely. And we're almost nearing the end of this
Okay.
incredible author interview. But
Yeah.
I do have a few final questions that I do want to ask. And this one, I actually asked a good friend of mine, another Wandering Scribe alumni, Emily Lanco, about this question, because she herself is writing a series, and this is a series that she's really, really happy about. And I'm going to ask you this question
Mhm.
you that I asked her, and it's a very long one, but I'm going to try to combine 3 questions into one.
Okay.
And ultimately, here it is. As authors, we love to write. We absolutely love to write stories. We love to bring people into immersive worlds, make it engaging, bring about the emotion, showcase the conflict. But at a point, we need to know when to stop writing. It's a very hard thing to do, especially if it's a series that we've come to grow and love. But we know that we have to stop writing because we want to keep the integrity of the story. We need to know when the story is actually finished so we can say this is how it's going to end. And also the ending that we land on, not just for each individual book in the series, but the overall ending of the major series is satisfying. And for her, when I asked her this question, he said it's going to be a very emotional journey, because I have loved this series for so long, it's become ingrained in my being. So for you, Damien, I ask you this question. When you ultimately get to the final book in the I Am King series,
Mm.
how are you going to feel at that stage in your life after writing this beloved series that is so integral to you? Because going back to our first interview, the one thing you want to leave behind among many things for your children, for your family, is these series of books, which will act as your legacy to
Yeah.
inspire them to be the best they can be.
Yeah. Oh, that's a super great question, man. Wow. I mean, I have thought about that, and I have plans for creating some new worlds after this series, but this particular series, yeah, that ending. I mean, I know how it ends. I know where the story goes. I can imagine, because for every book I've done, I've always had this elation or this moment of just great joy, emotion, and sadness whenever I finish a project. And that's the goal I aim for every book, to actually wrap up the story of Prince Beaumont. Man, I think I would feel like on top of the world, you know, like that would be a life's accomplishment. You know, even if I don't continue my other series after that, if I could just get this series and this story about this young boy completed, it would be such a great achievement. Because the thing is, the main character, Prince Beaumont, he is named after my son. And this is my son's reading the book now. He's reading book 1 right now. The thing about Beaumont is it's my son's name, and I could argue maybe his likeness, even though he and I share pretty close, features. He's like, my clone. But the story is really about me. The personality of this young character, the way he reacts to the world, the things he's experiencing, the themes of resilience. It's really my story. I think a lot of people might assume reading it that this is what Beau is like, or this is what Beau's life is like. But I'm using him as the name, but I'm really writing about myself. And this is something I learned many years ago that I can't remember exactly what it was. It was either a class or I was watching a video from an author. But they were saying that as a new writer, that first story is always personal. No matter how you try to chop it up and change it, until you become a true professional, that first story you ever write is going to be a personal story really about yourself. And it wasn't until I was kind of reviewing book 1 and I started getting into book 2, I realized, yeah, that's kind of true. Like, I'm using these names and these characters, but all of these are facets of my personal journey, my personal opinion. So I think coming to the end of the series, it's going to be closing a chapter in my life. I don't know where I'll be in my life. I'm sure my children will be much older. I don't know if I'll be in the same house or have the same career or what. But I know that once I get there, it's really going to be, it's like I guess, like your friend said, you have to make that decision to stop writing. And once my story is told and I've gotten through that, I guess the question would be, well, what would be my next chapter in my life? Is it going to be more about how I've grown older as I'm 40 plus and I'm looking at life differently? I have different goals, different aspirations now. Am I going to write more adult fantasy? Am I even going to write fantasy? I don't know. But that's such a great question. Yeah, I think that ending at the end of that series, when you put that last period and you type the end, it's gonna be electrifying and emotional, I think. What's your answer to that? I'm curious to know what you.
That's very interesting for me, because from my journey, I have a lot of books, but a lot of them are the beginning of their own series.
Mhm.
I am always constantly thinking of new books, new series, and there are so many that I'm very, very excited to explore. But I know at least for The Gathering, when I do get around to writing that particular series, it is going to be a very daunting journey, because this is the first book that I began writing. And then the next series that I'm excited to explore is Michael, because that's a very, very fun series to explore this post-apocalyptic fantasy world where the warrior angel Michael is leading this rebellion against Lucifer. And I know I've said this in numerous interviews previously, I am going to be probably doing a very big change in terms of, and what I'm call angelic fantasy is giving Lucifer a redemption arc as a character. And I'm very intrigued of how that's going to be, and showcasing his journey as a character. And there's one line that I love to keep. It's actually from Avatar: The Last Airbender, where Zuko and Uncle Iroh reconnect. And there's a line which I'm saving for that book, but I've shared it numerous times. And for those who know, this is the line where Zuko is talking to Uncle Iroh, literally on his knees, crying, at that low point, and Uncle Iroh just hugs him. And Zuko says, "How could you hug me and forgive me? I thought you hated me." And Uncle Iroh says, "I never hated you. I was just sad because I was afraid you had lost your way." That is the scene that I am going to kind of replicate in that book. And I know that's going to be a very powerful scene. And among many things, as authors, I want people to take away comfort in all of my stories. There are always going to be different things. They're always going to be following different characters. But ultimately, to my core as an author, I like to showcase good triumphing over evil.
Mm,
Maybe sometimes good takes an L. Sometimes not all the heroes win the battle, but they ultimately win the war. And as the final question, the final cups to this incredible interview, Damien,
yeah, this was fun. Yeah.
with all that said and more, for the I Am King series, what do you want readers and fans to take away, not just from book one and book two, but
Mhm.
the entire series when you fully flesh it out?
Man, really great question. You've gotten so good at this. That's so good. Wow. What do I want them to take away? The underlying theme in the story, I guess there would be two, would be love and resilience. And
Mhm.
I think what I would want to let people know is that this too shall pass. You know, like if you're in a situation that feels like the end of the world, my heart goes out to people who have been so pushed to the edge that they end up, doing the unspeakable and taking their own lives, and I always think to myself, how sad and how dark must their outlook be, that there's absolutely no hope that you would do the one thing that your body is kind of built against you doing, which is ending your life. And as authors, I feel that these kind of things we go deep on, because when we write, we need to get deep into the emotion. So that's something I thought about, of that mindset, right? Like, where is this person in their life when they end it? And I say to myself, well, how do you get someone out of that? You know? And I think sometimes we need to be reminded that, this too shall pass. If you're in a situation where you're homeless, this too shall pass. You'll find some way out of this. I've been in many situations in my own personal life where I had no money in my checking account. I'm going to work and I can't buy lunch. I could possibly get a coffee at home, and then that's my meal for the day. That was a cup of coffee. This was back in 2014, 2015, in those days when I first had my son. All my money had to go to the rent and to taking care of the baby, and I had nothing for myself. I wouldn't eat, and but I always had hope. I wasn't very religious back then at all. I didn't go to church. I didn't pray or anything like that. But I always had some sort of hope. I called it the universe at the time, but I always had some kind of hope. And it's interesting that you mentioned angelic, that genre you mentioned, and this
Mhm.
about Michael, and then the scene you picked out with Ero. It's so biblical. It really is, because that's kind of like the relationship of man to God. It's like, how I've done all these things in my life. I've blasphemed you. I have sinned and done every sin possible. I'm in the gutter. Yet, if I call to you, you welcome me back with open heart. How could you love me after all the bad I've done? And it's like, I've never stopped loving you. If you keep seeking, you'll find me. If you keep asking, you will receive. And if you keep knocking, the door will always open. Like, it's that unconditional love. And I love that theme, and I love the way you put that scene. And I agree with you. That's going to be extremely powerful. And that's going to hit a lot of people, specifically, who need to hear that in a very, very powerful way. So yeah. I definitely feel that what I want to get across to people is the power of love. Keep love in your heart, lead with love, and just have hope. And you know, hope kind of builds right into resilience, to be able to kind of go through these difficult trials in our lives. Like, I'm putting these characters through hell. I'm literally putting them through hell. They're losing people, they're losing themselves, they're getting hurt, they're inflicting pain, they're doing all these things. And by the end of the day, everything's going to be okay. They're going to be okay. They're going to have lives. Life goes on. Don't fall into despair, because again, you're going to get over that hill. And I want the book to kind of replicate that life's journey of going into difficult times and then making it out of it. And one other thing I wanted to say real quick was, as you were mentioning that idea of that redemption arc for Lucifer, Instantly, when you said that, I thought of Loki from the MCU.
Yes.
Yes, isn't that? I thought that's like the perfect example of it. Yeah, he's horrible. Like, you know, even his brother just telling him, man, like, you're the worst. Like, I love you, but you're terrible. You know, and but it's such a you know, I'm very excited to see how you work that out, because I think that's such a beautiful idea. And Lucifer for the world is just such a it's a character that's very solidified in everyone's mind, you know, like the Prince of Darkness. But when you delve into his actual arc, his villain arc, you could see that this was someone that fell from grace for, you know, making mistakes. And the idea that he could possibly come back from that is super compelling. Very.
Mhm. Absolutely, Damien. Absolutely. And what a profound and prophetic end to this amazing author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I want to give a huge thank you to my good friend Damien for coming back on the show. We wish him the very best with the I Am King
Thank you.
series and his journey as an author. Now,
Thank you.
Damien, where can people find you on social media if they want to connect and stay up to date, as well as buy copies of I Am King Book 1 and I Am King Book 2?
Great, thank you. So I'm most active on Instagram, like yourself. So that would be just my full name, no special characters. This Damien Shillingford. You can follow me there. My original book Instagram account was unfortunately hacked, and all that content is just gone. So I kind of have to rebuild it. But that's my personal Instagram, and it's filled more of kind of like my personal life and my stuff. But it'll be a good place to connect with me and message me and stuff. And my books are exclusive to Amazon, so you could get me on there. You know, I have my book 1, I have my first novella, Nasilla, and now I have book 2 in the series, I Am King. And then, and hopefully by next month, I'll have my second novella, which is called King Bohobond. And this kind of follows the story of Beaumont's father and his mother, and how we got to the beginning of book 1 in the first place. And it kind of introduces the main overarching antagonist of the story as well, to kind of get an idea of him. And it creates a lot more questions in the reader's minds, and creates these new conflicts, and kind of makes you question some things about the antagonist as well. So it's going to be very exciting. So I'm looking forward to launching that hopefully next month.
Absolutely. I will tag everything down below in the description of this video. And if you want to learn more about I Am King Book 1, I will also tag Damien's first interview right here above the screen. I urge you all to go and check it out, and be on the lookout for my review of I Am King Book 1. No, it's been a long time coming, viewers and listeners, but I am slowly whittling down my TBR list. So be on the lookout for that, which will be posted on YouTube, as well as my website, wanderingscribe.com, where I'll be posting all of my book reviews there, as well as the links to buy each book. And as always, viewers and listeners, thank you so much for your love and support. And again, a huge thank you to my friend Damien for coming back on the show. We wish him the very best for the rest of 2025 and the beginning of 2026. And until next time, this has been the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out, asking you all to like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, we'll see you all again. Have a wonderful day, everybody.